Watchmen is often described as the greatest superhero deconstruction of all time. But on the side, in the year 1982, Alan Moore began working on Miracleman, a much nastier look at what makes the superhero genre tick. He took a somewhat obscure 50s British superhero and transformed it into a scathing psychological narrative. It's also a story that will make you feel pretty uncomfortable because it reads more like a downright horror story and something more akin to the works of H.P. Lovecraft. It features all of his staples of writing, a disillusioned protagonist, a cold, indifferent world, and all manner of powerful alien beings that don't care one iota about humanity. Combine that with Alan Moore's fears of encroaching authoritarianism and insights into human nature, and it's elevated to one of the most devastating existential horror tales. Imagine one day you're just trying to live a normal life, and then suddenly you remember that you can become a god. You have the capacity for flight, super strength, and nigh-on invulnerability, but that comes with the catastrophic downside of self-awareness. Every facet of your life will be permeated with understanding that you stand head and shoulders above humanity. Your relationships will crumble, your sense of reality will be shattered, and you will have absolutely nobody to answer to. This is the case with our protagonist Michael Moran, who has lived his entire life as a lie, causing everything to violently spiral out of control. Alan Moore believes that human beings are ultimately creatures of self-deception, with many of his characters living in a bubble of ignorance before the truth begins to rear its ugly head. His version of Swamp Thing was nothing more than a mere husk of sentient plant who believed that he was human. Rorschach was a man who disguised himself as a moral absolutist who ended up being swallowed up by his own identity and subsequently ignores the crimes and violence of the comedian. It's a fundamental aspect of human nature that we lie, and primarily to ourselves. Otherwise, we may be on the verge of insanity. Becoming aware is often an incredibly horrific process because it often means discarding beautiful lies that we believe. It might mean you're unattractive, or you're a bad person, or the entire world might be upside down. To quote from Lovecraft, "The most merciful thing in this world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all of its contents." In Michael Moran's case, that placid island of ignorance that he once inhabited is taken down by layer, especially when he is not only aware of his powers, but he uncovers Project Zarathustra. He is no longer a mere superhero, but a creature designed in a lab for the sake of harnessing science and Gargunza's selfish pursuits. Initially, having superpowers is a fun and exciting thing. It's like a childhood dream that finally came true. But with all that power, it leaves a lot of possible bleak implications. Human beings are obsessed with having power, but it's that same obsession that can lead to one's own self-destruction. Moran is now effectively made into a god, and his struggles reflect many of the exact same struggles that Dr. Manhattan and Watchmen had. His godhood strips him of every semblance of humanity to the point where he can't empathize with his wife. It starts off subtle with him scaring her with his newfound powers, but by the end of Alan Moore's run, it's safe to say that Moran no longer is there. With such overwhelming power, there'd be no reason to submit to any level of normality. Personally, I find this to be the most horrific concept in Miracleman because it's like the real person is still there, but swallowed by a perfect husk of a human being. It's like your very own mind is being held captive, and it can get to the point where it won't come back. It's very reminiscent of the Yith in the Lovecraft story A Shadow Out of Time, where a great race project their own consciousness and take over any mind they want. It's even more terrifying in Kid Miracleman's case, where his other personality tortures him until he lets him out. In other words, it's like there is no Johnny Bates, there's no Michael Moran, there is only the host. If you would like to support me or this channel, please consider becoming a member today. The lowest tier starts only at 99 cents, and you get early access to my videos, badges, and even member-exclusive videos. You can support this channel also by visiting my Redbubble link down below and buying some of the art that I make. You could print it on shirts, stickers, or even artboards. Thank you. Who watches the Watchmen is a famous phrase taken from the Watchmen graphic novel that asks the question, who keeps people in power in check? Who is keeping people in power from doing whatever they want in a world that often puts the worst kinds of people in those positions? I don't have an answer for that, but Miracleman displays power as a fragile and unpredictable thing when you put it in other people's hands. It's easy to see why one would be cautious of letting someone like Kid Miracleman run the show, but one would think that Miracleman would be able to handle this kind of world differently. But just because he might seem like a better fit and might have better intentions doesn't mean that he is a better fit, except for when he told Margaret Thatcher to fuck off. That was pretty cool. What he ends up creating is a totalitarian system that's entirely run by fear of Miracleman and the other gods that he puts in place. Him and Kid Miracleman are essentially two sides of the same coin. During the fight, both of them end up committing horrific acts as they are now indifferent gods. You can see how easily Miracleman might end up throwing away his morals if he feels justified enough in what he's doing. That safe-looking utopia is nothing more than a fragile and hollow victory. You could say that about most versions of utopia presented in fiction. They may seem peaceful on the surface, but beneath that is nothing more than dysfunction. I would say that Kid Miracleman's reign might be a little less horrific, seeing as he only has interest in taking it out on humanity, but Miracleman ends up taking humanity's self-determination away. Imagine if you took a helicopter parent that has to micromanage every aspect of that child, and then expand it on a global scale, and that's pretty much what Miracleman is doing. Humanity doesn't even stand a chance because they couldn't possibly take up arms against a literal god. There's almost a paradox in human nature where we often try to fight for our freedom, but at the same time, if the right person comes along to run the show, many people will happily lay down their rights for what they perceive as a benefit. Usually, we only move on to regret such actions in hindsight, or when it's too late. That is, if we even have the ability to regain our own freedom. I believe that this reflects on Alan Moore's anarchist stances. It doesn't matter what the person's intentions are going in, because they will always end up being corrupted by that power. I find Miracleman so terrifying because in our own real world, it rings truer than ever now. I'm sure anyone who's been paying attention to current events has also confirmed that the people in power can basically do whatever they please, and we're essentially helpless to stop what they're doing. Miracleman may show us that the world is screwed up, but the answer isn't wishing for some powerful figure to lead us into a golden age. True power is actually held in the hands of the people. You look back at comics like this and realize Alan Moore was hitting the nail on the head. He was using the superhero medium as a stand-in for people's inability to deal with real-world issues. Part of what attracts people to comic books is that it appeals to a lot of infantile fantasies. You take all the real-world complexities and make them into really simplistic power dynamics where a big behemoth of a man comes to rescue the entire world from itself. By living in this fantasy, you take power away from yourself and give it away to someone else. Alan Moore, I think, says it best: we've all got this immense power, and we're still sat at home watching pornography and buying scratch cards. We're rubbish, even though we're as gods. Part of what makes Miracleman such a terrifying read is the fact that it's the uncomfortable realization that we've already doomed ourselves to the power that exists. We're already living in that prison of our own making. We don't even live in a world where superheroes exist, but most of us don't have the will to fight back against said powers. We're a bunch of frogs in a boiling pot who accept the status quo for what it is, and the result's nothing short of disastrous. Maybe this is just part of human nature, and we don't really enjoy the freedom that we talk so much about. Miracleman isn't just a comic book, it's a cautionary warning about the future that we've slowly been embracing for years and deluding ourselves just like Moran.